Hoorah! Hello, I'm Zaccura and welcome back to my channel, and in today's video I am going to show you guys how I draw hair. This is a tutorial that I've been meaning to do for some time now, but I've never got around to it, so here it is, finally! So as you can see, I have 4 different heads here, and I'm going to be showing 4 different hairstyles, but in particular I wanted to create this tutorial that would really just explain the whole overall concept of how I break down hair so that I can draw it without getting totally bamboozled by it, because hair is something that's very flowy, very random, so you know, how do you break that down so that you can understand it, so that you can draw it? And really that concept is the same whether you're doing short hair, long hair, curly hair, straight hair, whatever. It's really the same thing every time. So I wanted to make a tutorial that would just explain that overall concept so that you'll be able to hopefully be able to draw any kind of hair after this tutorial. And lots of practice. So without further ado, let's get into it, and I hope you guys find this video useful. So we're going to start with this head over here, and for this head I'm going to do long straight hair with bangs. So how I like to break it down is I think of the hair in terms of locks, like locks of hair, not individual strands of hair, also not like the whole shape of the hair like you would see in Dragon Ball Z. It's kind of like the whole shape of the hair, but it's kind of something in between where I break it down into little locks. So let's say I wanted to start over here. So this is her face, by the way. This is the way she's facing, and her eyes would probably be around like over here, I guess, and maybe this is her nose. Yeah, that's the best drawn face 2018, I know. And so I'm gonna start with the bangs, and I'm gonna start with like the front of the bangs. That way it'll make it easier for me when I need to fan them out. So starting from like roughly around the top of her head, I'm just going to put a lock of hair. Yeah, there you go. That's a lock of hair. And that's basically all there is to it. And I just keep adding more and more of these locks of hair. Now, because her hair is very straight, some of her locks I'm going to be keeping with a pointy tip, such as this one, but some of her locks I'm going to be keeping with a straight bottom. And this is going to really show that her hair is really just cut straight. You know, yeah, I guess you could do all of them with this straight bottom, but I don't feel that looks very realistic, because even the straightest cut hair is going to have variations. And now that the bangs are pretty much all filled in, I'm going to start with the rest of her hair. And starting at that same point at the top of her head, I'm going to start the hair that goes down. This lock is going to be behind her ear. Now, mind you, straight hair, even though it is straight, because of how long it is, it's going to curve or sway or whatever. So I'm going to kind of make it, you know, flowing in this sort of, you know, whatever S shape this is. And again, making it a lock. I'm going to have a strand of hair that goes in front of her ear. And I'm just going to continue over here, creating this sort of line. I guess you could draw a line right here if you want to help you with understanding where the part of the hair should be. But that's basically that's the part where her hair goes this way and the hair goes this way. So I'm going to be continuing on this side of her head. As you can see, some of the locks I'm going to make crisscrossing over each other, because hair is a bit random. Even if it has an overall flow to it in a certain direction, it is going to still have certain locks of hair that will be going in the other direction. And sometimes I'll start locks down here. Like as you can see, I already kind of ran out of space up here, right? But there's still like empty space right here. So maybe I'll just add a lock in over here. Maybe a lock will be behind and it will cross over. And on the other side of her head, I'm still going with that whole thing, but because it is hidden by her head, I can just put the top of it. And some of her hair is probably going to be peeking out, so again, I'm going to just make locks. And the longer the hair gets, I feel the more it starts to spread out and the more wavy it starts to become. So like, for example, the bangs, they really don't move that much, as you can see. They're really straight. They're just kind of round, kind of follows her forehead. But once it kind of passed her chin, as you can see, they start branching out and it starts really fanning out more. And yeah, so as you can see, like for example, this lock goes all the way down pretty much straight here, but then at the end it's going to curve a little. And I'm usually not afraid at all to just keep putting more and more lines. You know, you may think it might make it look messy, but as long as they're all kind of going in the same general area, it actually just adds detail. So, you know, if I feel like, oh, it needs to kind of be more going this way, I just go right over those lines and, you know, who cares? Maybe another lock over there. And, you know, even beyond that, you can add locks on top of each other. So what if I want a lock, a stray lock that kind of goes in the wrong direction? Because people's hair usually isn't absolutely perfect. Sometimes they have hair that goes a little straight away, a little in the wrong direction. And that's really all there is to it. At this point, I will start to basically pick the locks that I want, because as you can see, it's kind of a mess everywhere. There are a lot of lines that go over each other. So this is kind of where now I will sort of darken which lines I want. And after I've pretty much darkened all the things, you know, all the locks that I want, I'm going to kind of erase all those extra lines. This way they won't get in the way when I shade. So like for example right here, as you can see, there's so many lines going here, it's very dark. I'm just going to erase most of those because I've already decided on these two lines, this line and this line, to be a lock. So there's no need for all those lines inside it. And at this point, you're pretty much done. The only thing left to do now is to shade it in, or color it in. If you were lining this with a fine liner or ink and then coloring it in with watercolors or whatever, this is pretty much it. Now before I move on to shading, I'm going to do the other different hairstyles. And so as you can see, really the way to make hair that looks natural and flowing is to just let your hand be natural. Let it go wherever it wants to go. It's true that hair does have a flow. As you can see, it goes down, bumps out, and goes back in. And that was the overall flow of the hair. But beyond that, the exact, you know, locks, or, you know, some hair goes in the other direction, just let your hand do whatever it wants to do. Just keep going, as long as you kind of keep to a general idea. And if you don't keep to a general idea, that's okay too. It's just that the hair will look messy. People have messy hair. If you want to draw a person that has messy hair, then, you know, you can disregard having any flow in the hair. You can have hair that goes all over the place. And now we're at that point in the video where we go to voiceover Zaccura. Yeah, so I decided to do the first head almost in complete real time so that I could really explain and show the whole process of how I draw hair easily. But for the rest of the hairstyles, I decided to do it in time lapse, and I'll just simply tell you the slight differences or slight tips that have to do with each different type of hairstyle. But other than that, everything that I said in the first part of this video applies to all kinds of hairstyles. So here I'm doing short hair, and it's short straight hair. So some tips for that is that because it's cut very straight, I'm going to keep most of the bottoms of the locks cut straight, like I explained with the bangs in the first head, where I have some of the tips pointy and some of the tips parallel flat. For that, I'm still going to keep to that. Some of them are still going to be pointy even in the short hair, but most of them are going to be flat to show that the hair is really like a fresh haircut almost, just really cut straight. Also note that I did this hairstyle with the hair going behind her ear. And if you're doing that, especially with short hair, one thing to remember is that the hair will kind of do a slingshot in a way, because hair always wants to fall straight with gravity. So if you push it behind your ear, it's going to sort of create this slingshot, and it's going to sort of almost come up after it reaches the bottom of the ear. Also, for those parted bangs that I did for the short hairstyle, if you notice, I have quite a lot of volume in those. Like, they go up from the skull before going down, and they go up a lot. And this is more part of style rather than like realism. Real life hair doesn't have that much va-va-voom, you know, unless you put some gel in there. But so, you know, you don't have to make it go that high up. But that's just part of my style. Also, because it's short, it's also going to be neater, and that has to do with the fact that it is straight. And so the hair isn't long enough yet for the hairs to start going and clashing all over the place. So there are a lot less stray hairs, a lot less hairs going in random directions, because it simply hasn't reached that part where it's long enough to really get tangled together. Basically, the longer the hair, the more tangled it's going to get. When it comes to curly hair, as I'm doing here now, I'm starting to do the two curly hair heads. The first one I'm doing fairly short curly hair, and one thing I noticed, and I never would have really been able to like put this tip out there unless I videotaped myself and noticed, but I tend to keep to like 3 different types of locks when it comes to hair, curly hair, which I will have on screen here. And these are pretty much the different locks that I draw for curly hair in variations. And again, with curly hair, you're doing the same thing, it's just taking it one lock at a time. It's true that curly hair tends to be a little bit more difficult because each lock in itself is a little bit more unruly. But again, just take it one lock at a time and play with the variations. Don't do the same, you know, locks every single time, otherwise it will look a little bit, you know, unrealistic. And when it's short like this, also, there's not really much flow. The only flow, I guess you could say, is that it does branch out from the part. I made it sort of a side-swept bangs kind of idea, and so they kind of come out of there. But other than that, they start to sort of curl in all different kinds of directions. Also, one thing to note that I did for both short hairs, the bob cut, straight short hair, and the short curly hair, is I lightly sketched out the hairline first. And this will help you, especially if you're not doing a hairstyle that has bangs. You can look up reference photos of different heads, because people have all different kinds of hairlines. Some people have very V-like hairlines, some people have more straight hairlines, but I basically lightly sketched in the hairline. That will help keep me on track so I don't accidentally, you know, start the hair where the eyebrows should be, or, you know, make them have like nearly bald or something, like huge foreheads or something like that. So yeah, you might want to put in the hairline. That will help you keep you on track. Then when it comes to long curly hair, and this curly hair is pretty much like the same type of hair as the short curly hair, but it's longer. And so when curly hair becomes longer, the less curly it becomes, and that's because of gravity. It relaxes the curls, so it really stays kind of wavy for most of the part. But at the very top, at the very tips, at the very bottoms of each lock, if you notice, I do kind of put them into these swirls, into these curls. And that's because there's less gravity down there, there's less hairs down there, so there's not less gravity down there, it's the same amount of gravity, it's just there's less weight, so there's less, it's being less pulled. And so it at the very bottom I put these sort of spiral curls into the locks, and this is to show that the hair is indeed very curly, but it's because it's so long and so heavy that the curls become kind of relaxed. Also, for the long curly hair, if you noticed, I made the hair kind of pinned back behind her ears in the front, but there are a couple of little, you know, baby strands that come out in front of her forehead, in front of her ear and stuff. And this is again to just sort of keep more to like the realism, and that is we all have little baby hairs and flyaways, and so these hairs often will stick out, you know, unless again if you put lots of hairspray, lots of hair gel, if you're going, you know, to do gymnastics in the Olympics, you probably wouldn't have those little hairs sticking out in front of your head. But you know, these are all very natural hairstyles, minimal gel, minimal hairspray. Also, another tip to keep in mind about hair to keep it looking natural is that all the locks should not be the same length, because hair doesn't grow at exactly the same speeds. Also, even when you get a fresh haircut, a lot of time you will get a haircut that has layers. So parts of your hair is longer and shorter than each other, so keep that variation. If you notice, there's a lot of variation in that long curly hair girl. And this will show a lot of volume. It'll make the hair look a lot more voluptuous. So and also, if you notice, to kind of make it look more interesting, oftentimes where certain locks will bump in, I'll make the lock right next to it bump out. You know, almost like if you look at a DNA strand, I guess, you see like it bumps out and goes in at the same part. And I'm not going to do this every single time, but sometimes I'll do that to show variation in it. I really hope this all makes sense. So once you have your sketch finished, the next part is to shade it in. Or of course, if you were to want to color it in, then the next step would be to line it out with your fine liner, erase the pencil, and then color it in with whatever color medium you want. But for this tutorial, I'm going to be shading it in with a pencil. So I briefly talked about lighting and shading about hair in my How to Draw a Manga Girl tutorial part 2 thing. I'll have it linked in a card. But so basically the way I like to think of it is wherever the hair bumps out is usually where the light will catch it the most. But of course you also have to pay attention to your light source. So for this first head that I'm doing on the top left, I decided to kind of have the light source on the top right-ish. So the part closest to it will be the most lit up, and the part farther away will be dark. You know how light works. So anyway, so yeah, basically wherever the hair bumps out is where the light will catch it, and it's easier to understand when you look at the footage, hopefully. But basically you see, like, for example, in the bangs, the bangs are round, so the part that bumps out the most is the middle part of it. The bottom of it is like, imagine like touching her forehead, it's going in towards her eyes. The top of the bangs are attached to her skull, and the middle is the part where it's kind of bowing out, and that part is where it's going to have the most highlight, as you can see. And this applies to the rest of the hair as well. So how I shade it in is just like with drawing the locks, where you take it one lock at a time, I'm going to be shading in the hair one lock at a time. So I'm basically going to fully shade in one lock at a time. I'm not going to try and, like, you know, shade in the whole head at the same time. Just take it one lock at a time and, you know, just really narrow in on each lock and think, where would the light hit it on this lock? And just concentrate on that one lock at a time. It'll make it a lot easier to understand. And that's pretty much it, so I'm going to speed it up the footage quite a bit, because that is really it. Just take it one lock at a time and think about, you know, where is this lock in relation to the light source, and which part of this lock would hit the light the most. I'd recommend practicing with pencil, because pencil you can always erase if you make a mistake, so you can get a lot of practice that way. Also, I personally just feel that when you shade it in with a pencil, it just looks so much more detailed and nice. Also, another extra tip is you can use your eraser to sort of draw highlights, and this only works, of course, if you're doing pencil, because you can just, you know, erase the pencil. Though I suppose you can put like white gouache or white paint to do a similar effect with color, but it isn't really the same. So at certain parts, as you'll see, I use the eraser to kind of create a ring of light, And this is kind of more adhering to, you know, that manga anime aesthetic where they often have like a ring of light going around the head or whatever. So that's just personal preference. You can or cannot do it however you like. Also, I always do the shading, all the lines, as you can already see, in the same direction that the locks are going in. And this will not only add shading, but it will also add texture to the hair. In a way, you're kind of drawing every single hair now at this point in the drawing. And so if you do all of the shading in the same direction of the locks, everything will start to blend together to a point where you may not even be able to see all the locks that you originally drew before. Again, this is something that's kind of unique to pencil because it's all the same color, same texture, whatever. If you were to line it out with a black fine liner and then color it in, those black lines will always show. So yeah, and that's the same thing with curly hair, short hair, straight hair, whatever. Again, just take it one lock at a time, even with the curly hair. Again, the curly hair may, you know, bamboozle your head like, wait, what? How does the light hit it? You know, what the heck? But again, just try and keep to thinking about each lock at a time and thinking like, okay, where is this lock? Where is the light source? Which part of this lock would be lit up? And I really do feel like this is something that you just get better at with more practice. So practice it a lot and you'll get better at it in no time. And so that's pretty much it for the tutorial. I would say that my style of drawing hair isn't realistic. It's not realism. It's actually probably the only thing that I developed without using real life. Like I didn't really do many studies from photographs or real life studies when it came to hair. I'm not really sure why, I just kind of skipped it, I guess. I did that a lot with anatomy, with lighting and shading, but when it came to hair, hair was always just that thing that I never really looked up photos for. And when I did, I always found it a little bit hard because hair, it ends up looking like a block. Like you look at a picture of hair and you're like, where the heck do I start? Like, where? Because there's no really lines or shapes in it, and I draw with lines and shapes. So when it comes to anatomy, it's easier to find the lines and shapes because you can be like, oh, the skull is a circle up here and a triangle down here, and the body is like these trapezoids and stuff like that. But I'm like, where are the lines and shapes for the hair? Where are they? So, you know, it was a little bit harder. So this is kind of like a way I developed on my own. Not to say it's like the best way. It's definitely probably not the best way, and also it's kind of stylized, so it's not the only way to draw hair. You know, I put an emphasis on not drawing the whole shape of the hair, but many styles do that. You know, like I mentioned Dragon Ball Z, there's nothing wrong with how the hair is drawn in Dragon Ball Z, that's just how the style is. So yeah, this is just my way of doing it. It's not the way, it's a way. Alright, that brings me to the end of this video. I'm so sorry that it ended up being so long. I have that problem, my videos tend to be like way too long. But hopefully you guys found this tutorial, this video useful in some way, or at least entertaining. And if you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comment section. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on upcoming videos. I make new videos every week and they're not always this long, don't worry. All the links to my social media pages are in the description box where you can follow me for daily updates. And until next time, stay awesome, stay inspired, always. See ya!